Why does nobody talk about Austin Powers anymore? It's hard to believe that this movie franchise that took the late 90s and early 2000s by storm could be so forgotten in today's world. Over the course of 3 films, Austin Powers dominated the cultural zeitgeist. But as time went on, Mike Myers started disappearing from the public eye. Audiences moved on to other movie franchises, and before we knew it, no one seemed to care anymore. If you're sitting there asking yourself, "Where is all the mojo gone, baby? Yeah!" Well, you're in luck, because I'm de-thawing a legend today. But before we do that, make sure to whack the subscribe button so we can go on more groovy adventures together. Now sit back, relax, grab a healthy serving of fruit, and let's go back in time to investigate what made Austin Powers so groovy. In 1997, Austin Powers' International Man of Mystery came out and made a decent, if not entirely remarkable, box office gross. However, something happened once the movie was released onto the home video market. An almost supernatural event occurred where everyone got the movie's quotes stuck in their heads. It was almost like everyone had Tourette's, only instead of cuss words, it was Austin Powers quotes. Mike Myers had already experienced success before Austin Powers was born, particularly with his stint on SNL and the movie adaptation of Wayne's World, which, at least for the first film, became a huge success. In fact, to this very day, it's still the highest-grossing SNL brand film ever made, grossing $183 million worldwide. Even though the characters were already a hit on SNL, the success of the movie came as a surprise to everyone involved. Cut to 1 year later, and the sequel debuted to a much lower box office sum of $48 million. It didn't really have enough time to build anticipation from audiences. Not to mention the marketing looked very similar to the first film. After the disappointing box office returns of Wayne's World 2, Myers decided to drop plans for a third movie in that franchise and instead focus on a genre that was near and dear to him, the spy genre. In the 1960s, the James Bond films were huge. Austin Powers wouldn't even exist without those movies. But did you know there were some lesser-known spy films that also inspired the creation of Austin Powers? Like the Michael Caine starring trilogy of Harry Palmer films, a film series comprised of The Ipcress File, Funeral in Berlin, and Billion Dollar Brain. Mike Myers partially based his Austin Powers look on Michael Caine from those films. The Matt Helm films starring Dean Martin also inspired the Austin Powers movies. There was The Silencers, Murderers Row, The Ambushers, and The Wrecking Crew. The Matt Helm character, like Austin Powers, also had a side hustle as a fashion photographer. Early on, Myers got a chance to test his Austin Powers persona while performing in his band Ming T in the early 90s after his time at Saturday Night Live came to an end. The band had a 60s aesthetic and had Austin Powers as their lead singer. It's funny to think that this character got his start in a band before the movies ever existed, which I just found out today. It's just kind of cool. Anyway, Ming T recorded a song for International Man of Mystery, and they showed up on screen in Goldmember. Jay Roach was hired to direct, even though he had only made one feature film before Austin Powers' International Man of Mystery. It was called Zoo Radio. Never heard of it? Me either. It's been cryogenically frozen in 1990, the year it was released. Nonetheless, Jay Roach, who had become good friends with Myers, really understood the world of Austin Powers. After reading an early draft, Jay gave Mike 10 pages of typed notes which helped shape the film into something more substantial.
This camera. Jay Roach. He's been trying this.
Afterwards, Myers knew he had found his director. Here's how the back of the DVD describes the plot. Frozen in the 60s, secret agent Austin Powers is thawed back into action to once again battle his arch enemy, Dr. Evil. With his sexy sidekick, Miss Kensington, Austin must stop Dr. Evil's outrageous plot to control the world. But first, this time-warped swinger must get hip quick and discover that there's no free love in the 90s. This movie would become a springboard for Jay Roach, who went on to direct films like Meet the Parents, Meet the Fockers, and all of the Austin Powers movies. In the movie, Myers nailed the dual role of Austin Powers and Dr. Evil. Originally, he wanted Jim Carrey to play the arch-villain. However, Carrey decided to star in Liar Liar instead. Dr. Evil is such an iconic character. Right, Lorne Michaels? That's right. Dr. Evil's voice was based on the famous SNL producer, and that makes it so much funnier to me.
Controlling?
Controlling, sort of has a negative context. I'd say
in charge.
A hefty ransom?
It also seems to have inspired Jeff Bezos' current look and vibe. So, yeah. Seth Green, Elizabeth Hurley, Mimi Rogers, Michael York, Robert Wagner, Will Ferrell, and Mindy Sterling, all of them combined to make a powerhouse ensemble. At the time, no one thought that Austin Powers would be a gigantic hit when it was released, and they were right. It made a respectable $53 million in America on a budget of $16.5 million. Good, not great. Overseas, it made an additional $13 million, which falls way short of $1 billion. Test screenings for the film were poor. In fact, the American premiere of the film was a muted event in general. In an article from The Hollywood Reporter, Seth Green remembers wearing a suit to the event and no one taking his picture. Things were looking bleak. The first time I saw Austin Powers was on DVD. People may have skipped the movie in theaters, but they were definitely watching it on the couch at home. On Halloween night, 1997, Mike Myers was driving around on the streets of Hollywood and saw like 15 different people in a row dressed as Austin Powers. Something had broken through. Soon, New Line Cinemas greenlit a sequel, Austin Powers, The Spy Who Shagged Me. This is when the series really took off. New Line must have known they had something special, and they were willing to show that with their wallets. On the first film, Mike Myers made $3.5 million. On the second film, he made $7 million. Wait until you hear how much he made for Goldmember. We'll get there soon enough. The most anticipated movie of 1999 was Star Wars Episode I: The Phantom Menace. It debuted on May 19th. The Spy Who Shagged Me came out only a few short weeks after that on June 8th. The teaser trailer for Austin Powers 2 really grabbed the audience's attention that summer. The movie voice guy, don't you miss the movie voice guy, guys? I mean, it's just...
Now, the saga will continue.
You were expecting someone else?
He says, if you see only one movie in 1999...
See Star Wars. But if you see two movies, see Austin Powers.
I remember seeing this trailer in a movie theater at the time, and the whole place laughed when Dr. Evil spun around in his chair. It was a brilliant way of capitalizing on that year's biggest release. And now, not only were people pumped for Star Wars, they were clamoring for Austin Powers too. You see, this was back when people actually went to movie theaters regularly. This is when it was a cultural powerhouse. It was before streaming changed everything. Austin Powers was everywhere that summer. There was this Got Milk ad, remember those? There were magazine articles giving us a sneak peek into the film and its actors. Madonna did a song for The Spy Who Shagged Me, and Austin Powers featured heavily in that video, which exposed him to a broader audience on MTV as well. This movie made more in its opening weekend than the first movie made in its entire box office run. The premise for The Spy Who Shagged Me goes like this. Intent on world domination, diabolical genius Dr. Evil travels back to 1969 and steals Austin's mojo. Now, Austin must return to the swingin' 60s, recover his mojo, and stop his terminally square arch nemesis from liquidating the world. Together with fab CIA super chick Felicity Shagwell, Austin faces off against a heinous henchman of tremendous girth and Mini-Me, Dr. Evil's deranged 1/8 sized clone. The addition of Mini-Me was iconic. I actually met and worked with Vern Troyer on the set of a pilot I acted in called Plum Island. That was in 2014. I was playing a stoner who gets hired to be a janitor on Plum Island, a place where they've been doing experiments on hybrid animal-human creatures. It didn't get picked up. Vern played a half-man, half-rat creature in it. I liked the guy, although we only got to talk to each other for little bits at a time. He was in an electric wheelchair and seemed like he was in pain a lot of the time. He was a nice guy though, and I'm grateful I got to meet and work with him. 4 years later, he passed away. Rest in peace, Vern Troyer. The Spy Who Shagged Me saw Myers take on not one, not two, but 3 roles this time around. Fat Bastard being the newest addition here. It's funny that Fat Bastard has the same exact voice as Shrek and the father character from So I Married an Axe Murderer. It's just one of those Mike Myers staple accents, I guess.
Oh, is that all the thanks I get for the native hot sex? I'm dead sexy.
By the way, it took 7 hours to get Mike Myers into the prosthetic mask and bodysuit required to play Fat Bastard. Stan Winston said that it was one of the grossest characters he and his team had ever sculpted. That's quite a compliment from the late master of special effects makeup. In a stroke of brilliance, each Austin Powers movie came out the same year as a James Bond film. International Man of Mystery came out the same year as Tomorrow Never Dies. The Spy Who Shagged Me came out the same year as The World Is Not Enough. Goldmember came out the same year as Die Another Day. Mike Myers versus Pierce Brosnan. The Spy Who Shagged Me and Goldmember actually made more money at the US box office than The World Is Not Enough and Die Another Day. Impressive, don't you think? Austin Powers actually had a lasting effect on the Bond films going forward. After the Brosnan era of films wrapped up, Daniel Craig ushered in a more grounded and gritty version of the super spy. Gone were all the kitschy elements that we all came to know and love. Craig directly credits Austin Powers for this. In an interview with MI6 Confidential magazine, he was quoted as saying, "We had to destroy the myth because Mike Myers f***ed us. I'm a huge Mike Myers fan, so don't get me wrong, but he kind of f***ed us. Made it impossible to do the gags." Audiences were getting used to seeing an Austin Powers movie every other year at this point. New Line Cinema was willing to give Mike Myers anything he wanted now, and he got paid a whopping $25 million for his services on Goldmember. That's some serious shag you money, I'll tell you that. By the third and last film in the series, huge celebrities were joining in on the fun. My favorite part from Goldmember is the opening sequence. Tom Cruise as Austin Powers, Gwyneth Paltrow as Dixie Normus, Kevin Spacey as Dr. Evil, and Danny DeVito as Mini-Me. It's also good to see Michael Caine join the party too, especially since Austin Powers owes a debt of gratitude to his Harry Palmer character. He was perfect casting. And don't forget about Steven Spielberg and Britney Spears. Look how agile Spielberg is in this scene. The shh hits the fan when Dr. Evil and Mini-Me escape from prison. Joining forces with the super freaky Goldmember, they kidnap Austin's father, Master Spy Nigel Powers, in a dastardly time travel scheme to take over the world. Before you can say shake your booty, Austin cruises to 1975 and teams up with sexy foxy Cleopatra to stop Dr. Evil and Goldmember from their mischievous mayhem. It was impressive how good the action sequences were this time around. The budget was the biggest of the franchise, clocking in at $63 million. Goldmember became the second biggest film in the franchise with a worldwide gross of $296 million. When I rewatched the series recently, I started wondering just how well these movies would do if they were released today instead of back in the late 90s. In an age where everything is instantly spoofed and parodied on platforms like TikTok and YouTube, how can you make a movie that feels culturally relevant when it takes half a year to shoot and release it? Culture moves way faster now. It's hard to keep up in a feature film format, you know? There's been talk about Myers returning for a fourth film in the series that focuses more on Dr. Evil. The series director Jay Roach also said there were originally plans to make a fourth movie that focused on Mini-Me and his life outside of Dr. Evil. Obviously, that won't be possible now. As of this video, it seems like Austin Powers has been put on ice for good. Myers did make an appearance on Jimmy Fallon as the character in 2018. I think that might be the way to go with this franchise now, you know? Smaller doses here and there. It's what our culture does best. Kind of like how Wayne's World had a reunion on SNL for its 40th anniversary of the show. Whatever the case, the series serves as a hilarious time capsule from a period where pop culture lingered in our minds for longer than 60 seconds, when times were a little simpler. Do more videos make you randy, baby? Do they? Oh, well, all right, calm down. Here's another one. See you next time.